Hey everyone, we'll be looking at applying materials in Revit so you can actually do your proper 3D rendering in it. Now that applies even using a default Revit rendering engine or using a V-Ray for Revit or similar. I would highly suggest you download and install a trial version of V-Ray for Revit if you are trying to do this within Revit itself, because Revit rendering engine is quite I don't want to say shit, but yes, it's shit. So try to use it V-Ray for Revit, but if you can't, you can just use default Revit rendering engine. It's after all, it should be good enough for what we are trying to achieve. Now, having said all of that, regardless of which rendering engine you're going to be using within Revit, you always will be using Revit Material Editor and its um, and the way it actually works. So let me show you this first. So this is just a default scene that I use for some of my other tutorials. It really doesn't make a difference. But in essence, if we navigate to the Manage tab and we select our materials in here, you'll be getting a window similar to this. All right. Now with some of these, you'll probably be having something like this. Okay. Now, first of all, the left side is the materials that are currently showing in your project. Okay. And these materials, any one of them will always have your identity, the graphics, appearance, physical, and thermal. Physical and thermal are basically just used for calculations on how the thermal insulation and similar works. So you can just literally ignore these two. In terms of the appearance, we literally just will be looking at the appearance tab because that is the one that actually is showing you what your material is going to look like when rendered. The graphics is showing you how your material will look like in your shaded view format, like you can see behind me. So you can adjust this if you want, but basically doesn't affect how your material is rendered. It's only the appearance tab that actually shows you what the rendered material will be looking like. Okay, having said that, while this is showing what's currently inside your project, um, the expansion here that I just clicked on earlier will be showing you what's available in your library overall when you search for something. So for example, if I was to search grass, you can see in the upper window here that there's nothing, which means that there's no material called grass currently within your project, but there is a material called grass in a default Autodesk material library within on your desktop somewhere. So this is the default Autodesk Revit materials that come with the program. So if you want to use one of these, you can just double click on it to actually import this into your project itself. There we go. And then under here, under appearance, you can see what's currently selected. And you can sort of select this image, click on the image itself, and then replace this image to be something else. And you can change the scale as well if you want to. But yeah, basically this is where you will be doing your editing and changing your image to be something else. Okay. And under source here, you can actually click on that source and then you can actually replace it with something else if you want. Okay, and this will usually show you all the other material textures that are currently in the Revit library. So you can look at some other ones. As you can sort of see here, I'm just going to go thumbnails so you can actually see a little bit more. You can select any one of these, but these are really low quality, crappy textures. So I always recommend you go and download a proper seamless texture from the internet. Okay, and there's many websites shown. One of them is textures.com. You can register for those. They used to be former cgtextures.com. They are now called textures.com. Registration is free. But you will have a limit of how many things you can download every single day. If you, of course, if you buy a subscription, then you can sort of download as much as you want. But I don't think you need that really. There's plenty of other websites you can get the textures from. So basically, this is how you can sort of change the texture. This is the material you have in your scene. And if we click on this little sucker here, this is showcasing us this will hide a little menu here that's not really relevant. If you're doing a search engine to search for certain elements, the expansion here on the left side is not really relevant at all. So you can hide that one if you want, up to you. And then the asset browser is this little icon here. So if we click on this, you will get the asset browser of all of these different elements, sorry, all of these different materials within the library itself. These are not necessarily the ones in your project, but they're inside the Autodesk library, which is similar to the lower left element here where we selected the grass itself. But the useful thing about this is you can sort of change any one of these existing ones. So for example, if I was to search for aluminium or aluminum, if you want to be from the US, please don't. Aluminium, okay? That's how you say it. All right, sorry. Aluminium. All right. So, for example, this one here, we already have the appearance for the aluminium here. Unless you want to duplicate and create a new material, we would, for example, want to replace the aluminium appearance with let's say 41 diamonds, or if I search for anything else, let's say stones, stone, I guess. Let's say we want to replace the aluminium look with the blue stones look. Okay, so you would just select the one you want here, and you just double click, and it will not do anything else other than just replace the appearance material tab from the aluminium with something else, which is now called the blue stones, as you can see here in the upper left corner. So that maintain the material itself, you just replace the way it looks. Okay, so this is how you can use the asset browser here to replace certain elements within your Revit itself. Now, if you want to duplicate or create a new material, you can literally just right click and say duplicate. I can sort of say this is aluminium number 2, and that can be sort of, let's say that can be dark or whatever you want to call it. But the interesting thing is when you look at this now, you'll see that in the upper left corner, the blue stones, the same material is used for the appearance, and it has a number 1 above it. That means that this is no longer a single material being used. It means that this material is being used in more than one material, as in the actual project material itself. So you can see that aluminium and aluminium dark have number 1, and for example, metal steel will have a 0. So 0 means that this is a unique material and in the appearance tab, and it is not being used by any other material in the project browser. But with these ones here, both of these are using the same one. So basically it's counting this as 0, and then this one is counted as number 1. Meaning is if I change one of these, the other one will change as well. So if I change the stones here to be stones gray, for example, you will see that the other one has changed as well. If this is not what we want, and usually we don't, why the hell would we want to have a duplicate of material that has the same one there? You would select the new one, the one that you duplicated, and you would sort of click on this one here and say duplicate this asset, and you will see that this is now becoming 0 again, meaning this is a completely unique material as per this one here. So that means that I can change this one here from stone gray to say medium brown like this, and the other one will remain as it was before. So to reiterate, when you want to duplicate an object, you can duplicate it like this to make it a little bit quicker. I can make it dark number 1. Let's say, for example, that's fine. And then if I want to modify anything in the appearance tab, I need to click on here and say duplicate this asset, and this will make this a unique object. And then I can actually slightly change the reflectance value. I can make it matte by reducing reflectance. I can change, some small things, but leave the actual textures as is, or you can actually go in and change the texture completely. That's really up to you. And basically, this is how the materials work. V-Ray would be the same. It would just be sort of using V-Ray materials slightly in terms of the way it works, and you have to have the plugin to sort of use it and use the V-Ray materials in there. But the essence is exactly the same. You still will have to use this to apply materials to your scene. Um, so let's just go in and try to apply a few bits and bobs. Okay, so for example, this one here, if you go to your brick wall here, you always have to go into edit type for the walls and any other object. And then under the structure, we need to click on edit. And in here, we can actually see what our materials are made out of. So they're made out of masonry on one side and masonry brick on the other side, and there's just a thermal air insulation in the middle, okay, which is sort of irrelevant. So in this case, if I want to change the exterior side material, which is the finish number 1, I click on the materials. As soon as you click on it, there's a little a rectangle box on the right side. You need to click on the little three dots, and then basically that takes you to your material browser. So in this case, I'm going to choose our aluminium again. Let's say dark number 1, which has these little timber slats as an actual material. And I click OK, and I click OK again, and OK, and that now actually replaces it with that object on one side, and the brick is still showing on the other side. And it's as simple as that, as sort of changing the materials. So for example, if I select my roof here, go ahead, edit type, go into structure, select the structure. So the material is just using a default category for the roof, and in this case I'm going to say no, and I want to apply, let's say, aluminium here with the little um, elements there. And you can sort of see when I'm applying these, let's apply this one here. You can see when I apply these here, nothing changes in here, nothing much, they just become white. And the reason why is, like I said before, this is a shaded view. All right, so that means if I was to go back to manage and materials here, and I select my aluminium dark, for example, you'll see that in the appearance we have these things, but in the graphics view we have nothing selected. Okay, so if I was to change this one here, the surface pattern, if I was to change this to be solid, and let's change the color to be nice little puke green, excellent, and apply it, you will see now that that is showing up like that. Okay, if I can change this one to be concrete, it will show up as concrete, but this has nothing to do with the rendering. So if you want to see the rendered materials in Revit viewport, you have to click on the little shaded view and select realistic mode, and that will actually then switch and show you what the actual materials will look like when rendered. Of course, this is not using any advanced sort of rendering global illuminations. It's just showing you the proper textures in your viewport, similar as in 3D Max. But this is not really going to show you a properly rendered surface. So you still have to do a render to actually see how this will look like. All right, so that's a little teapot here as well. So if I click on that little teapot there, and I will get this little menu, you can set your setting quality. So I'm gonna, let's say, medium. You can select your resolution here. Select your exterior lighting scheme, so that's suns only, that's fine. And now here is the interesting thing. You can actually select your sky with a few clouds. These are just fake ones. Or you can actually select your image as well. So that means you're going to choose your own image, load up your HRI map or panoramic view map, and that will do the trick as well. In this case, I'm just going to go back and say a few clouds, um, and just do a render quickly. And you will see why I'm saying that you should never use Revit rendering engine if you can avoid it, because it is quite slow and quite crap. Really, amazing combination of the rendering engine, I know. But as you can sort of see, it looks much better than it did in the viewports, just by sort of using the render, of course, because it's using the global illumination and so on. If you zoom in and out, because this is now a rendered image, it will just show you what was actually rendered. You can go and adjust the exposure afterwards, which is actually really a nice little touch after that. That you can, I mean, you can also do this in V-Ray as well, but Revit actually applies this as well. So you can actually modify properly these settings after you render the image, which is quite a nice little feature. But you'll be always dependent on the quality setting here, and the actual the screen resolution. So you can actually always go higher by choosing printer and so on. But yeah, just really up to you how you want to do this. And it will tell you when you made enough changes that this is no longer valid, the rendering image, and then you can sort of re-render again. So if I go and click on high, click on render, now my workstation is a little bit faster than normal, so while the rendering times are not that bad for me, for you, you will probably have a little bit more of a longer period of time to render. As you can see, by choosing high, the rendering takes much longer than on the medium, and it will take a while to sort of do. So I'm just going to leave this through while I talk to you, so you can see what the high resolution looks like. In terms of the scales, you can, again, if you go to the materials editor and exactly where you selected your image for your texture, you can actually adjust the scale as well, and you can increase or decrease this. You can actually select similar to the 3D Max, where you can actually select how big your image is going to be. So if you have 1.5 tiles in your image, you can say this tile is 300 mil by 300 mil, and then this will be a more realistic size scale wise. So it is useful. It is fairly limited in how you can apply the materials to these things. And there you go. That's the quality. You can see nothing to brag home about, to be proud, but it is sufficient if you have issues using other programs. Okay, so don't be ashamed. It's the technique of doing everything else rather than the actual 100% image quality in the end. So we want you to do and show what you can do uh, by using geometry and lighting and everything else rather than just pure, a good looking render. So don't be afraid of how it looks. You can always fix this up in Photoshop as well a little bit to make it look better. Okay, so by choosing this, you can apply your 360 as well. I suggest you use a 360 cloud, and you can just Google or actually YouTube the Autodesk Revit 360 image, and you will find plenty of tutorials how to do it very accurately and precisely. So, and they explain it much better than I ever would. So just use those to actually do your 360. But yeah, in terms of the materials, that's how you would do it. If you want to apply different ones for the textures, for example, let's say for the topography, again, you just need to select the object, and it's either going to be into edit type or it's going to be in the properties here. Always look for the materials and see this is saying by category. So if we go and type for grass, the one that we imported, grass there. If I select grass for my topography, this is going to be green. And if you want to break up elements again in the topography, like I showed you before, we will go under messing and site. We will go split surface or the sub-region. Sub-region is probably the less destructive one of the two. And then you can select and draw in, of course, in top view or whatever you want to get whatever you want. And when you're done, you can then select that particular element and change the category in the materials to be a different material altogether, just like we've done thus far. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Yeah, hope it was useful. All right, thank you guys. Take care.